Have you ever wondered how a bank can be reporting these incredible profits one minute and then bam, it's teetering on the edge of collapse the next? Or maybe you've seen two banks, both making the exact same profit, but one gives its shareholders a way better return. How does that happen? Well, the answer to both those puzzles is the same. It's a single, powerful concept that regulators are, frankly, obsessed with controlling. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain on it. Okay, let's just get straight into it with a bit of a paradox. Take a look at these two banks. Both of them, Bank A and Bank B, made an identical profit, 100 crore rupees. But here's the kicker. Bank A gave its owners a 4% return on equity, or ROE. Bank B, just 2.1%. So what gives? How is that even possible? Well, the answer is tied to the very same force that nearly brought down the entire global financial system back in 2008. So what is this mystery force? It's all about financial leverage. That's the secret ingredient, the thing that explains the difference between our two banks. You should think of it less like a simple tool and more like a massive amplifier, one that can dial a bank's performance all the way up or all the way down. So what is leverage in simple terms? It's just using borrowed money, things like customer deposits, to buy assets that will hopefully make you more money, like loans. And when it's working, oh man, it's like a financial superpower. It can juice a bank's returns into the stratosphere. But, and this is a huge but, it's a double-edged sword. Lose control of it, and it can bring the entire house down. All right, to really get our heads around how leverage does its thing, we need to look at two key numbers, two different ways of measuring a bank's performance. And trust me, they tell very, very different stories. We're talking about return on assets and return on equity. Let's start with return on assets, or ROA. Now, I want you to think of ROA as the pure, raw horsepower of a bank's engine. It tells you, straight up, how good the bank is at its day job, making money from its assets. It completely ignores how the bank is funded. No financial engineering, no funny business. It's a pure, clean measure of just how well the business is actually being run. And then, on the other side of the coin, you have return on equity, or ROE. Now, this is the metric that gets all the attention. It's the one shareholders are glued to. And unlike the clean, simple ROA, ROE is where leverage comes into play its game, for better or for worse. It's where the magic or the mayhem really happens. A little bit of debt can pump this number up and make an okay bank look like an absolute rock star. Okay, and here's where you can really see it in action. Just look at this table. See that ROA column? It's pretty steady, right? That's our engine, just chugging along. But now, cast your eyes over to the ROE column. It's all over the map. It's either skyrocketing or completely collapsing. And the only thing changing is the amount of leverage being used. That's the turbocharger kicking in. So we've established what leverage does. It turbocharges ROE. But how exactly does it work? What's the mechanics behind it? Well, let's pop the hood and look at the actual formula, the blueprint that connects everything together. And here it is. Deceptively simple, right? ROE equals ROA times the equity multiplier. But don't let that fool you. This isn't just a math formula. It's the entire transmission system of the bank. Think about it. Your ROA is the raw power coming from the engine. The equity multiplier, that's the gear you're in. And the higher you shift that gear, the faster your ROE goes. So this equity multiplier, what is it exactly? Well, you calculate it by taking the bank's total assets and dividing them by its shareholders' equity. What it tells you in a really intuitive way is how many dollars of assets the bank is controlling for every single dollar of its own money. So if that multiplier is, say, 10, that means for every $1 the owners have put in, the bank is actually controlling $10 worth of assets. And where did the other $9 come from? You guessed it, it's borrowed. And if you look at this chart, you can see the two faces of leverage in stark relief. That moderate leverage scenario, the bank hits a rough patch, but it survives. But now, look over at excessive leverage. That's the ghost of 2008 right there. That huge multiplier delivers an amazing ROE when things are going well, but the second things turn sour, the moment that ROA dips into negative territory, that same multiplier turns into a wrecking ball. It doesn't just reduce equity, it obliterates it, leading to total failure. And that collapse, the collapse of firms like Lehman Brothers, wasn't just a single company going under. It was a wake-up call for the entire planet. It was a systemic shock that forced regulators everywhere to finally confront the massive danger of letting leverage run wild. 30 to 1. Just let that number sink in for a second. 30 to 1. That was the kind of leverage firms like Lehman Brothers were running on.
Imagine walking on a tightrope, and for every pound of your own weight, you're carrying another 30 pounds. The slightest wobble, the tiniest gust of wind, and it's over. That's what it was like. A tiny 3.3% drop in the value of their assets was all it took to completely wipe out every last penny of their capital. Game over.
So the big question is, how was this even allowed? Well, the problem was the old rulebook. It was based on something called risk-weighted capital. In theory, it sounds smart, but in practice, banks were able to argue that some really complex, really risky assets were basically safe. This meant they had to hold almost no capital against them. They were hiding immense leverage in plain sight. On paper, everything looked fine, but in reality, the whole system was a ticking time bomb. Well, after the firestorm of 2008, regulators from around the world came together. They knew they had to build a much, much stronger system. And what came out of that was a whole new framework, a new set of rules called Basel III. The entire point was to make sure a crisis like that could never, ever happen again. So let's take a quick look at this new rulebook. You can see there are still risk-based requirements in there. They haven't gone away. But the absolute game changer is that last one, the simple leverage ratio. This is the ultimate backstop. It's a blunt, simple, non-negotiable rule that basically says, look, I don't care how clever your risk models are or how safe you claim your assets are, you simply cannot borrow more than this amount, period. It's the safety net that's much, much harder to get. And what's really interesting is that these are global standards, but individual countries can make them even tougher. For example, the global Basel III rule for the main capital ratio, the CAR, is a minimum of 10.5%. But here in India, the RBI says, nope, our banks need to hold at least 11.5%. Now, that extra 1% might not sound like a lot, but believe me, in banking terms, it is a massive additional cushion. It's a very deliberate choice to build an extra protection for a dynamic, fast-growing economy like India's. And this really gets to the heart of the matter, the core philosophy behind regulation. Look at the two outcomes here. The conservative bank, sure, it has a lower ROE when times are good. But when a crisis hits, its equity cushion holds up. It survives. The aggressive bank, on the other hand, looks like a hero for a while with its high ROE. But at the first sign of real trouble, its equity is wiped out and it fails. For a regulator, the choice is a no-brainer. Their job isn't to maximize bank profits, it's to protect the entire system. They're not trying to be the fun police, they're the firefighters, trying to stop one burning house from taking down the whole city. Okay, so we've been deep in the weeds of how all this works. Let's pull back up and summarize the most important things you absolutely need to remember from all of this. Let's boil it down to the 3 key takeaways.
Okay, number 1. ROE on its own is basically a meaningless number. You have to look at the ROA behind it to understand if a bank is actually being run well. Number 2. Leverage is an amplifier, period. It makes the good times great, and it makes the bad times catastrophic. It's a rocket ship that can either get you to the moon or explode on the launch pad. And finally, number 3. Capital rules are not there to slow banks down. They are the seatbelts of the financial system. They might feel a little restrictive, but they're there to make sure everyone survives the inevitable crash.
So, now we understand the big picture, the systemic risk and the regulatory guardrails designed to contain it. But that leads to another question, right? How do banks manage all the other risks they face every single day inside those guardrails? We're talking about credit risk, market risk, liquidity risk. How do they handle all that internally? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle in our next explainer.